Hello, good morning, and welcome to the first session in our TrendSoft user group event. My name is Bobby Haggard, and I'm one of the consultants here at TrendSoft. Let's first make sure everyone is logged into the correct session. You've tuned in to this first session titled, Should We Stay or Should We Go with Dynamics GP? In this jam-packed session, we'll be covering several topics, including the future timeline of GP, the upgrading and to the latest version. We'll discuss features that all GP clients should implement, as well as some tips and tricks along the way. Now, another important topic we'll be covering is why you should think about migrating to Dynamics 365 Business Central. We'll show you the differences between Dynamics 365 Business Central and GP and talk about a migration plan. Now, a little bit of housekeeping notes before we jump in. First, we went ahead and muted all of the phone lines to try and keep down on some of that background noise. If you have a question, which we absolutely encourage, please use the Q&A feature of the Zoom webinar tool. A couple of my coworkers, Terry Cox and Callie Wagner, will be managing the Q&A feature. Additionally, if you would like a copy of the presentation or the video recording after this session, please just drop your email into that Q&A. We'll know what that means, and we'll be sure to get you that information once it becomes available. Finally, don't forget at the conclusion of this session, you will receive an evaluation. If you fill out that evaluation, you are then registered for our giveaways, which we will announce the winner of next week. All right, so let's jump right in. But before we do, we have a little pop quiz here. So here I'm going to launch a quick poll. And that poll is just asking about your organization and the possibility of migrating to the cloud in the future, if that's something you guys are considering, whether it's on GP in the cloud, whether it's on Business Central, whether it's some other option. So getting lots of feedback here. Looks like there's definitely some interest in that. A lot of people are saying yes within the next 6 months to 1 year, which is great. A couple of you are also saying within the next 2.5 to 3 years. And then a couple are saying, no, we plan to stay on premise, which is kind of the feedback that we're often getting. We're definitely seeing a lot of feedback from clients and prospects that moving to the cloud is certainly a goal within the next 6 to 12 months that we're seeing. So appreciate that feedback from everybody. All right, with that, let's go ahead and just jump right in to our presentation here, and we'll get started. All right, so as you saw upon registration for this user group event, there are several other sessions as noted here. If you have not had a chance to register for future sessions, please visit our website at trendsoft.com to register. If you've missed a session, or if you're watching this on recording, as I mentioned earlier, if you would like a copy of the slides or the video presentation, or if you'd like to talk to our team to discuss further, please just reach out, let us know, and we'll be happy to get in contact with you about that information. All right, I'd like to introduce Matt Wood. Matt is our Dynamics project manager and team lead. Matt has been working with Dynamics for about 10 years and has lots of great experience with things such as Dynamics GP, Dynamics Nav, Business Central, and Power BI. So this time, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Matt and let Matt take it away.
All right, hello everybody. This is a session for the TrendSoft user group. This is going to be covering Dynamics GP. Just a quick introduction of who I am. I'm Matt Wood. I'm the Dynamics team lead here at TrendSoft. Handle both the GP product and the Business Central product. I've been here around 10 years and probably talked to many of you here that are on today. All right, so let's get in and let's look at the agenda for the session here. All right, so first thing we're going to take a look at is the Dynamics GP roadmap. So we're going to see where the GP product is going, how long out do they have it roadmap through Microsoft. We'll also look at GP and the cloud, as well as Dynamics 365 Business Central. And then we'll end with some GP tricks, and we'll also look at a couple new features that have come out in the most recent October release. All right, so first thing, as many of you know, there's Microsoft releases these roadmaps periodically just to give you an idea of where the product's going. So we know that GP at Microsoft is, if we look at this, is going to be around at the very least till 2024, and then we'll see what comes down the pipe as far as what they release later on. What they have done is since October 2019 is they've gone to what's called the modern life cycle for Dynamics GP. So what that means is every year they're going to release 3 updates for GP, and they're all going to kind of come out in the same time frame. So every October they're going to release a new version of the system with major updates, with new features and bug fixes. So there will be no features except in that no new features except in that October release. We also know that in June of every year they are going to release tax updates and bug fixes. So if there was any tax updates that needed to be done, those would come out in June. And then we're always going to have a year-end update, which many of you are familiar with. This is for 1099s, payroll, any kind of tax updates that need to be applied there, as well as some bug fixes as well. Now, notice on the right-hand column, so to stay current, what they're looking for everyone to do is basically get one of those releases throughout every year. So you're going to want to try to stay up on the current year's release, and that ensures that you'll have a quick, easy path to the next update. So typically, if I'm, let's say, still running the October 1st, 2019 release, for example, and I want to go to the October 2020, I'm good. But if I was running, let's say then in 2021, I want to go to that, but I'm still on 19, I'm most likely going to have to do a jump there. So I'm going to have to jump from 2020 to 2021. Now, we'll also notice this roadmap goes through 2023. So it's something to just keep in your minds as you all are GP users. Microsoft has made a push for cloud products. So they're looking to move kind of everyone over to a cloud product. And GP is not really involved in that particular piece. Now, we don't know for sure that that means GP is going to go away, that Microsoft will no longer support it. There's been no word from them that says that's true. But it is something to keep in mind, and we're going to talk about here in this session to get started, just so that you're prepared if that does come down the pipe. Now, typically, Microsoft will support, even if they were to sunset something, 3 to 5 years after, so they will still provide support after that. So even if in 2024 they said we're not going to release any new updates, they would still support that probably through 2029. So it's still a long lifespan there, and there may be an update to this somewhere down the road, and we'll be sure to update you there. All right, so let's talk about GP in the cloud, because as I mentioned, Microsoft's trying to get everyone pushed over to that cloud world. They want to get everybody up in that cloud environment. And GP was not designed for cloud deployment. There was, when it was released, Microsoft bought this, I believe, back in the 90s, and it's similar product that it was then. They've obviously added features to it. They've changed the look and feel a little bit, but for the most part, it was designed for an on-prem deployment. And it's important to note that Microsoft currently has no plans to change the design for a cloud or web-based system. So there is a web client for the GP, but it's not a fully rich, feature-rich product. So everything's pretty much an on-prem install with an actual thick client install, Windows client install. So, and there is no plans, if you look at that roadmap and you look at features that are coming, there is no plans to change that. So now, that does not mean I cannot run GP in a cloud environment. I can run GP in the cloud. We have many clients, some of you that are probably on this call that do. But typically what we do in that situation is we're going to host GP in a cloud environment, which typically is going to be an Azure environment. And really all that means for GP is you're not going to have a server there that you have in your facility. And it's not going to be on your network. You're going to run Azure, and that's going to where all the infrastructure is going to be. So all your servers are going to be there. GP is going to be installed there, and users are going to connect, either whether that's through a remote desktop or a remote app, but somehow they're going to connect up to that GP environment in the cloud. So it is possible to run GP in the cloud. And what does that cloud give us? It gives us pretty much access to the system anywhere that I have internet access. So that's one big advantage, especially as we've learned in COVID, where work from home becomes more and more important. So if I'm in Azure, as long as I have access to the internet, I'm typically going to be able to connect up to that environment and get to my GP. Also, it is a different pricing model for your infrastructure. So you may be familiar with, every 3 to 5 years, I'm going to have to buy a new server. If my server crashes, I've got to buy a new server, and that can be a pretty hefty investment every time that server has to be bought. In the cloud environment, there is no big purchase up front. What you're going to do is pay a monthly fee for that infrastructure. So you're going to be paying based on users, based on the performance that you need, a certain fee every month that's recurring. That's going to be for that Azure environment. Your GP license can still be a perpetual license that you pay an annual enhancement on. We can work with you to make it more of a recurring, or GP does offer a SaaS service as well. So if you wanted to go to a more monthly based license model, that is available. But you're still going to just be running that hosted through an Azure environment. At Trendsoft, we do provide hosting, and we will use the Azure platform to do that. So we would install SQL GP on Azure environment, and then you could run GP in the cloud. You'll be able to access it anywhere, and then we will provide support for that infrastructure in the Azure world. All right, so the question then becomes, what if GP is sunset? So what if Microsoft were to come out and say, we're no longer going to support GP, and this is the date that that's going to happen? So if that were to happen, we want to be prepared for that in case that does happen, because we do know that Microsoft is trying to get more and more customers moved over to the Business Central. So first of all, what are my options? So I kind of look at it, we basically have three options here. We can continue to use GP. No problem. You can still use GP just like you do today. Us at Trendsoft will support GP. As long as our customers are running GP, we will support it. So we're not going to leave you high and dry. If you say, I love GP, I know there's a very loyal user base out there for GP that would like to continue to use it, even if it were to sunset. So we will support GP, but at some point, Microsoft would come and, like I said, let's say 2024, they said we're going to sunset it. 2029 most likely is when they would stop supporting it. So Microsoft would no longer release new updates for it. If you had a problem where we needed to open a case, for example, with Microsoft, they would no longer support that product after that time frame lapses. But doesn't stop you from continuing to use it. You could continue to use GP as long as you want. And again, we will still support you if that's the case that you want to go. All right. Another option would be to migrate to Business Central. So you've heard me say it a few times, and we're going to talk about it a little more in depth here in a second. But we can potentially take a migration path from GP to Business Central. So some advantages of that for us, for you and for us working together, is Trendsoft is experts in both products. So we know GP very well, and we also know Business Central very well. We've been working with both products upwards of 20 years. Me personally, 10 for both. So we do know both products very well, and we can help you navigate that change over from GP to Business Central if that's the route you wanted to go. Also, because obviously Microsoft would prefer you to go there, or would like to see you go there somewhere down the road at some point, they do provide migration tools within Business Central to do that. So there are tools within Business Central that can make it easy to move your master records, for example, from one GP database to your Business Central environment. And then thirdly, they do offer attractive licensing for current GP customers. So many of you have already talked to Tara about this, but you can set yourself up on a monthly recurring model, and they will provide you BC licenses with that. So you have your GP licenses and your BC licenses, you own them both. So very attractive model there. And I know they've even run promotions upwards of 3-to-1 user count. So if you have 10 GP users, you could get up to 30 Business Central users, depending on when those promotions are running. So that's another nice reason to move on to Business Central. And then, of course, the other option would be just to move to a new ERP. So not going to Business Central, leaving GP, and moving to something else. That's obviously an option. Now, I want to be careful here because it sounds I'm almost having a funeral here for GP, and I don't mean to be that way, but we do want to be prepared if that were to come down the pipe. So GP for now, you saw the roadmap. We're going through 2024 for sure, and that could definitely be extended. There's nothing that says it won't be. But we do want to be prepared if that were to be the case. Here's some options. If you want to get more in depth and talk about that, we can as well. And of course, we don't need to do anything right now. We know that GP is going to be there for at least 3 years and then probably 5 more years post that with extended support. And that roadmap may move out, and we'll be sure to tell you if it does. All right, so because I've talked about Business Central, I do want to give you just a quick overview of what that is. So it was formerly called Dynamics Nav. So if you're familiar with Nav, Navision, for example, Business Central has just been rebranded, or Nav has been rebranded to Business Central. So that product has been around for a long time. Again, it's similar to GP. It was purchased by Microsoft, I believe, in the 90s. And then they've continued to build on modules to that. And then have eventually rebranded this to Business Central. And now it's a fully hosted product offering that Microsoft's offering to the mid-market. It is cloud hosted or on premise. So this particular program you can either run in a cloud hosted environment, meaning Microsoft is going to have all the back-end infrastructure. They're going to handle that. It wouldn't even come through us on an Azure. It just comes with your license purchase. Or you can go the on-premise model as well. So you can do you can have your own servers, install BC there, but it is web client only. So that is all web client. You would log into a browser, you would go to a link, and that would bring up your system. Everything would be done in a browser. Obviously, very easy to access it. If you have internet, you really just need a browser, and you could work on that. I've even when I've forgotten my computer, just logged onto my son's Chromebook and able to hit that Business Central link, and I'm right there ready to work on any machine that I might have had. One thing to note, though, it is named user license. So if you're familiar with your GP licensing, it is concurrent, meaning let's say I have 10 licenses. I can have as many users as I want set up. 10 can log in at the same time. On the Business Central world, it's named users. So if I have 30 users, I can name 30 users, and those are the 30 that can log in. And the licensing model is pretty simple with Business Central. So you're looking at typically an essential license, $70 per month, essential user, 100, and then they have some lower models starting at 8 for just team members and whatnot. So it is all monthly based. So you're going to pay a monthly fee for those licenses for the cloud hosted. The on-prem can still have a perpetual license model, but it's still named users. All right, another piece of this is Business Central is very easily customized, and we have a team of developers here that work on that. So we have a whole team that their sole job is working with customers and customizing systems. And I know customization can be scary when you hear it. I know in GP, a lot of times if you talk to us about customizing, we've pushed you away from that. And the reason being is we don't typically want to go in there and customize native code because it then in turn causes very difficult upgrades. But the Business Central model uses what's called extensions. And the way I like to describe that is it's similar to let's take your iPhone or your Android phone and you have an app store. So you go to that Google Play Store, you're going out to the Apple Store, and you buy an apps and you're downloading them and put it on your phone. Now those apps are all they're doing is loading a program onto the machine. They're not changing the iOS or the Android operating system behind the scenes. Similarly, with Business Central, those extensions are just apps that are loaded onto the system, and then they do things to extend the system and add functionality. So when an upgrade comes along, there is no native code touch. The upgrade can happen seamlessly, and then it's just a little bit of testing to make sure that it didn't do something to cause that extension to break. In fact, the cloud-hosted version, the updates happen automatically. Now you can schedule them, but they do happen automatically, and they release those typically 2 major updates and then a few in between, similar to what that roadmap you saw for GP. It's on a modern life cycle, so they're just going to continually do updates to it. And again, that's simple upgrade process, and So simple that it can happen automatically in the cloud hosted versions. So those extensions are loaded, and then they do extend things. It can be as simple as adding fields, or it could be adding whole modules to the system. We even have a couple verticals that we have that were built strictly on extensions for specific industries. So those industries have specific needs. We load our extension, and that gives them the functionality they need to use Business Central with ours loaded on top. Also, Business Central, it is strong in the supply chain and manufacturing model. So if you're in that business, it does a very good job of supply chain and manufacturing. Now, GP has that as well. These are a little bit more feature-rich modules than what you would see in GP. And I will say, the Business Central and GP comparisons as far as strictly financials and purchase orders, sales orders, check cutting, you're going to have similar functionality there with GP and Business Central. And obviously you're familiar with GP, so it makes sense to stay there if you like it. But these modules here, if you're in the supply chain or manufacturing, these really do add some additional functionality you're not going to have with GP. And then the last one I'll point out here on Dynamics 365 Business Central is simplified integration. So it is a more modern system than GP. So it has a lot of functionality as far as integrations go. And this can be simply integrations with your e-commerce, your point of sale, APIs, web services, that all comes very easily out of the box with Business Central. And then again, for reporting needs, very good connections with Power BI, Excel, that just come natively with the system. So it's a pretty short learning curve. And I can even, if you join the Power BI later, you'll see a little bit of that, what I'm talking about there on those. So that's just a quick overview of Business Central. If you've never seen it before, you don't know what it is, that's what it is. It's just another ERP system that Microsoft offers. And it is cloud-based if you want to be. All right, so if you were to want to migrate to Business Central, some things to think about. So as I mentioned before, very attractive licensing model if you already own GP to come to Business Central. So that part's pretty easy. You basically are just going to be converting GP licenses over to Business Central and sometimes going up threefold of what you have in GP. But some things that you need to consider. So third parties are a big thing in GP. So a lot of ISV, a lot of third-party community out there in GP. And they're similar to what we talked about with an extension, right? Those third parties extend GP and offer things that the native functionality does not. Now, that's important to remember because a lot of the third parties that are in GP don't translate over to Business Central one-to-one. So if you think about a key to act, for example, for anyone that's doing project management, things like that, there's not a similar key to act over here in Business Central, although that functionality may be able to be replaced by native jobs in Business Central or native service. Your binary streams, for example, your multi-entity management, if anybody's running that. Now that is one, interesting enough, that is in both. So they have the multi-entity management in both GP and Business Central. So that one kind of makes sense that you could probably move to Business Central without much trouble. The other ones I think about, your Mercorma for check printing, your Notice. You just want to kind of have an inventory of what those are so that if you decide this is something you might want to do, is there something that either the native functionality in Business Central can replace that, or is there another third party or the same third party maybe that Business Central can also offer you? All right, next one is migration tool versus manual migration. So as I mentioned in the last slide, there is a migration tool that will grab data from GP and pull it into Business Central. These are for master records, mostly accounts, customers, vendors, items, things like that, fixed assets. Those are things that Business Central already has a built-in process that can go out to the database of GP, grab them, and pull them over into Business Central. It will also pull transactional data, but it does not place them in the base Business Central tables. There's actually some historical tables that those go into. All right, and also to keep in mind with those tools is you have to be on a certain version of GP in order to use them. So if you're on an older version of GP, then most likely it's not going to work with those migration tools in Business Central. So our other option is a manual migration. And we've done this for a handful of our clients already that have migrated from GP to BC. And the nice thing about working with us with this is we do know GP very well. We know the tables we need to go grab the data from, and we know Business Central well, so we can basically get those out into the templates we need very quickly and get those imported into BC. For the handful of ones we've done the manual route, but this migration tool is ever evolving and it's getting better and better. So I see us using that tool more and more into the future. Another thing to think about is the storing of your legacy GP database. So you've got this GP database, you've got all this data, potentially 10, 15 years of data in that GP database that you might want to keep. So how are we going to keep that GP database? Because, and this would be a question you would have regardless if you went to BC or you went to a new ERP. You gotta think about, all right, what am I gonna do with my legacy data? So for the GP world, you could obviously just keep that GP database, keep GP running. You could go into GP and you could see that data as much as you want. You could also just keep the SQL database somewhere, have somebody write some reports that look into SQL, and you could bring up data like that. They also offer what they call an Azure data lake, so that I can take that database and I can store it up in the cloud, still have access to it if I need to, and get that data down if I need to. So if I don't want to keep an on-prem server, I could move that up to an Azure data lake so I can get to that data and then write Power BI reports or whatever it may be, because I can pull all that into a common data model. Next thing I'll point out is the intelligent cloud. So this is a tool that will help kind of bridge the gap between GP and BC until you kind of decide, do I want to do this or do I not? It can actually go grab data from GP and put it into BC on a continuous basis. So even if you said, well, I don't know that I want to go to Business Central, and even if I did, maybe I want to do it way down the road. You can go ahead and turn this on as long as you're in that recurring model, because you own BC at that point. And you can start having that data flow in to an intelligent cloud, view that data in BC, although you're doing all your work over in GP, if you just kind of want to get a look and feel for BC. All right, then the last two I have on here are account structure and posting groups. And the reason I point these out, these are some of the building blocks of the system, and they are different between the two systems. So in GP, for my account structure, so if I'm looking at my accounts, I'm typically going to have, and this is pretty typical for any chart of accounts, I'm going to have a segmented chart. So I might have a department as my first segment, main account as my second segment, and then a cost center, for example, for my third segment. And I'm going to lay that out in a way, so I might have 1, 2, 3 as my department, dash 1000 for my main account, and then dash 000 for my cost center, for example. So that's different than what Business Central does. Business Central is going to take your main account, so that 1000 I use in our example, and that's going to be my main account, and that's what's going to go into my chart of accounts. The segments on the outside are going to go to what's called dimensions in Business Central. So there is some planning there, right? If we switch over to Business Central, we have to plan for that, because most likely we're going to have to do some mapping there to make those accounts work. The advantage of the dimensions for me, the biggest thing that it gives me is my chart of accounts actually will shrink, right? Because now all I'm keeping track of is my main accounts in my chart of accounts. So some of you may have tens of thousands of accounts, because every time I add a new department or a new cost center, I have to add 60 accounts to track that. Well, in BC, I don't have to do that, because I'm still going to have my main account. And if I add a new department, I just go add one new dimension, and then I'm done with that setup, and then I can start coding to that. All right, then the second one to really wrap your head around is the posting group. So in GP, I can pretty much any transaction I key, I can go to distributions, click on distributions, and I can code to the GL accounts I want. No problem. I can make those changes anytime I want. Of course, they can default in, but I can make changes if I want. In Business Central, they use what's called posting groups, and these posting groups go to your master records, so your customers, your vendors, and your items, for example. And what they do is drive accounts based off that. So let's just take accounts payable, for example. So I've got a vendor, and I'm guessing in GP most likely you always hit the same AP account regardless, main account, and you probably have a default, and that default's in. Well, in BC, I'm going to set a posting group up, and I'm going to assign it to that vendor. So anytime I do a purchase invoice, for example, so anytime I do an AP invoice, when I key that in, I might have of course, I might post to different expense accounts, and I'm going to be able to key those no problem, but I will never see that AP account. It's just going to be flowing through based off my vendor setup. So again, something to think about, especially if you're not using defaults in GP. You would need to be able to kind of know, okay, here's my AP account and here's my payment discounts and things like that so that you can set those up in your posting groups. Okay, so that's Business Central. So now we're going to talk a little bit more just strictly on our new features for GP. All right, so first we're going to look at new features in GP 2021. So this is actually the release that came out in October. So it's a little bit of a rehash of what you saw in our last user group. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time here. What I want to spend a little more time on is just some tips and tricks I've seen throughout the years or that have come out new that I want to show you actually inside of GP. So we're going to start by just kind of quickly running through this, and then we will get into some tips and tricks and actually get into GP. All right, so they broke these down into 5 categories. So we have financial enhancements, distribution enhancements, human resources, payroll, system enhancements, and top feature requests. So on our financial enhancements, we have additional user-defined fields in general ledger. So you're familiar in most GP areas, there are user-defined fields. All this is they've added some additional ones in that general ledger transaction. So I believe you can go up to 4 now on that. The import credit card transactions, so just an import functionality to actually create invoices for credit card payments. That's what that one is. Automate financial full reconcile. So this one's pretty nice, especially if you've ever had to troubleshoot something and then had to reconcile something, and you have 10 years worth of data in there. You'll remember that GP tells you go reconcile the oldest year first and then work your way up. This new feature basically says, okay, you don't have to do that. Just reconcile the year you need, and it'll go do the old ones for you. A couple 1099 changes, the new NEC thing, which was a fun for everyone, I'm sure, but that is supported, and GP did a really good job on the NEC, getting that out and having that be pretty painless on the GP side, besides having to update the system. But once you got it updated, it really was nice. 299 miscellaneous, doing business as for vendors, so they've added that field inside of the vendor card. And then some additional copy and paste purchasing transactions from Excel. So the copy and paste feature is really nice. It was always in the GL, at least on some of the going back a few versions. They've added that now to a couple different places, the copy and paste in Excel to the purchasing. And then if you look down the distribution enhancements, they've made it so that you can do that to stock counts as well. All right, then we have print all sales documents, so we can just print them all at once now. And then in our human resources, we are now able to mask a social security number. So just for security reasons, that's a nice feature. Over on my system side, I'm not gonna spend a lot of these on here because it's a lot of kind of some technical stuff, but we are able to schedule check links now. I know some of you like to run your check links as part of your month-end close. You can schedule those now so that they can just run at night for you rather than you having to manually go run every single one of them. We do have multi-factor authentication now. So having a password and then another way, a multi web, phone, email, something so that I can authenticate a separate way. And then top feature requests, maximum print output screen. This one's just so that you can get a little bit better resolution on that. And then they've added some decimal places in currency setup so that if you're using different decimals in your Excel file that you're copying and pasting into GP, you now have a way to set that up so that that will match and work. All right, so that's our new features. And now let's jump over here. My PowerPoint will go. There we go. To some GP tricks. So These are ones I was at a virtual conference. I saw some of these. Some of these I knew, but I thought some of these I didn't even know, and it was really eye-opening. So I thought I would show you guys of these. And as far as those new features go, you can see that GP is not. They're still adding features. So I don't see us. We were talking kind of the funeral earlier. I don't see that being the case. I mean, as long as they're releasing features, we know that they're still working on the product. So we still have it there. So let's get to these tricks. So the first three I'm going to talk about, they'll talk about these all together. So we have smart list dates, any field in smart list, and then the smart list wildcard. Now this last one is one I did not know about till just recently, and this one is pretty cool. So let me show you these. Put over here to GP, and we'll go to smart list, and we'll just go to our account transactions as our example here. All right, so the first one was around dates. So, and they're all related to this search feature. Let me make this a little bigger here. So the first one I wanted to show you, so let's just take transaction date and is between, and these are some new fields, right? So we always had an enter date, current date, and some of that, but now what they've added is a lot of different things we can do based off dates. So this one, pretty simple, but if I wanted to run, for example, current date to the end of the, or beginning of the quarter, something like that I could run. Actually, it'd be the other way around. Beginning of the quarter to current date. Without having to enter dates, I can do that. And again, that's going to look at based off of my fiscal period setup. So just some fields there that we can use with dates. The other one that is nice, so this, of course, you've got all the fields that you can always pick based off the table that you're looking in. So I've got all these fields here. But if I go back to my selected columns, you'll see they have an any field. So if I select any field here, and this time I'm just going to say is equal to, and I'm going to type, or actually let's go with contains. If I just type cash, for example. So we can see out here, I've got cash in my description, but I've got all these other stuff too, but I just want to see things that have cash in the description. If I say okay, that's going to pop, and you can see now it's just searching throughout here and getting me those that have cash in them. All right, next one is the wildcard. Now this one I did not know about and I thought was pretty neat. So you're going to do account number, for example, and contains. And let's say I want to look up anything with 1100 in the account. So in that main account. So I'm going to say 00 dash 1111, and then if I use underscores, that's my wildcard. So what I'm telling it is, give me any account that starts with 000, has 11 as the first two segments of the main account, but then it can be anything after that. So it can be any numbers after that and then ends with 00. So I say okay. And you can see as I look through here, I'm getting all my accounts that have 11 as the first two digits. But I also, let me go up. So one here. So for example, this one right here ended in 30, and that's because I put the wildcard in there. So you can use that for any field and use those wildcards in the smart list. All right, let's hop back over here. All right, so default report zoom. So this one is just a little trick that I thought was neat. So if I come up, let's go to the checkbook, and this really works for any report. But if I hit print here, and I'm going to print this to screen. So it looks pretty big here, and that's because I've zoomed it into 150. But you notice I did not change that. Typically this would have been 100, but I did not change that. I just did 150. So how did I do that? So this one's a little bit more technical, but inside of my dex.ini file. So that file basically is a way to set settings up that will do a lot of things. And actually, I've thought about maybe even doing a webinar strictly on that. but it's inside of my GP folder, and then I go into data, and here it is. It's called the dex file. And I open that up, and you can see it has a lot of settings in it. And here at the very bottom is the magnify screen output. So you can set this, and it will actually magnify all your reports to whatever value you stick in there. So I'm going to set that to 200 now. I'm going to save. We're actually going to have to close GP to get that to take. We'll reopen that real fast here. Password right. All right, we're going to go back to that same report. Let's click that over here. Print screen. And now you can see it set it to 200. So it just sets that default magnifying when you print the screen. So I thought that one was pretty cool. And just showed you some of the things that DexINI file can do. Next one, Autocomplete Setup. So I'm going to take these two so we don't have to jump back. So I'm going to do Autocomplete Setup first, and then we'll look at the post to historical year. All right, so this one's actually done in your user preferences. And what this is you'll, as you're typing, let's say a vendor ID, for example, when you type those first few letters or numbers, it starts to autofill what was there, and you can select one of those. So what this is just some settings against it. So first of all, you can turn it on and off. So if I select that on or off, those will show up. But you can also tell it, okay, I don't want you to keep them forever. Give me the last 2 months, so I could put in 60 days or something like that, so that my list isn't crazy long. Or I could change my max number. So if I only want to just keep 1,000 or 100, I can do that. Or if I just want to completely clear it, I can use this remove entries. So just a way to use that autocomplete setup to keep that list tight so that when you're using it, it actually is useful. And it just tells you got to relog in when you click on that. All right, the post to historical year. This one I think has been long needed and has just been added in recent updates. So this one's done in my general ledger setup. And you'll notice there is now a posting to history that I can toggle on and off. So you'll remember before, and even if you go back 5 years, if you wanted to post to a historical year in GP, it could be pretty painful. You would have to basically reopen the year and then go in there and post it and do that. Even if you want to go back 2 years, you usually had to open up a case with Microsoft to do that. But what this functionality allows me to do is just select that, and then I can go post to a historical year, and it will allow me to post it and roll everything forward for me. So that's what that one is. All right, back over here. So a couple of these I'm not going to show, but I just wanted to point out. Extend AP description. So in the payable setup, there is a way to add additional field on your payables transactions, and those will allow you to post up to 200 characters in that description. Now, one thing to keep in mind with that one is it's just going to stay with the document. So when you're looking at it in the AP module, you'll see it, but it does not flow to the GL. All right, next one, custom links. So this one I also thought was pretty cool that I didn't know about till just recently. So to get there, we're going to go here to our drop down, tools, setup, company, and then we're going to hit custom link. So I've already set up a couple here. So I've got this one here that we'll look at just real quick. So this one's pretty nice. If you're doing sales and you want to be able to track tracking numbers, for example, what you can do is say, okay, on my tracking number field, and then you give it a name. So you can name this whatever you want. I just call it tracking. And then the value. So if it's ground, then I want you to go to this website. So what this could be used for is if you're doing sales orders and you're shipping things out and you want to put the tracking number from UPS inside the system, then I can just go to that tracking number field on the sales order, click it, and it'll take me right out to UPS tracking site. and take me to that tracking. The other one I did is just this checkbook, just so I could show you an example. So I just set up a checkbook. I put chase.com as my link. And if I come over, let's say to vendor, for example, go to here, let's go to options, let's select the checkbook, Uptown Trust. Now when I click that, before I had custom links, it would have just took me to the checkbook maintenance, but now it's added this online banking. So if I click that, you can see it takes me right out to chase.com. So that's just an example of what you can do with those custom links. Pretty cool functionality, actually. And you can set them up even up on customers and take you right to their websites, whatever that may be. All right, next one is additional post through GL settings. So again, this is one I'm just going to talk about for a minute. Well, actually, let me show this. So in our posting, we know we have the post to general ledger and the post through. And of course, if we don't select post through, we get a financial batch when that pops up. What they've done, and this was typically driven at the batch level, but if I turn this on, and it's actually in the newest version, I don't have it in this version I'm looking at, there's a same thing underneath allow transaction posting, which is post through general ledger, which means now I can post single transactions and have them post directly to the GL as well. And I could toggle it, right? So if I wanted to say, I want my batches to create a batch, but I don't want my singles, or I want my singles to create a batch, or whatever, vice versa, I can do that. Next one, auto create deposits. So if you're doing cash receipts, this one's a feature that is kind of hidden and it's kind of new, so you may not know about it. But I will go to, actually it's in tools, setup, company, and then if I hit options here, and I scroll to the bottom, there is this automatically post cash receipt deposits. And if I toggle that on, what it will do is change the way that my deposits get created on my bank side. So the main thing is, if I have a batch of cash receipts, so I've entered 10 transactions and I put them all in a batch and I post that in the system. What that's going to actually do is create one cash receipt over on my bank side. So when, let's say it was for $10,000 and it was $1,000 each. Without this turned on, I would end up with 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, and all those would be separate transactions in my bank. With this turned on, if I have that same scenario, what I actually get is one $10,000 deposit, and the thinking behind it is, well, if I keyed all those into the system, I'm probably going to take those to the bank later, and at the bank, I'm going to do one deposit slip, and I'm going to post those into the bank, and my bank statement's going to show $10,000 deposit on this date. So that's what that's used for. So I can turn that on, and it will mirror that functionality I just talked about. So if I had 10,000 in a batch, that's what will happen. All right, so that's that one. Last one to go over here. Getting close to the end of the time here. Again, this one I'm just going to talk about, but this is an update master records, and this is actually a PSTL tool. It is free, but it's something you have to install. But what this allows me to do is create master records or update master records and have them update across companies. So let's say I set up a vendor in one of my companies and I got to go set it up in the other 5. If I use this tool, whenever I create that vendor in one company, whatever companies I've selected that I want it to update in, it'll go update the rest or create the vendor as well, or the customer, and I believe accounts is the third one. So that one's a pretty neat tool there that you can use too. All right, so that's the session. Hopefully you guys got some good tricks out of that, and then also some things to think about on the Business Central side and where GP is going. We'll be around here for questions if you have any, and I appreciate everybody's time and listening in. Thanks.
All right. Well, thanks, Matt, for that great GP content. We now have a couple minutes for questions. So, again, our team has been monitoring the Q&A queue throughout the presentation for questions. So if you have a question now and you haven't submitted it yet, go ahead and submit that through the Q&A tool. We will have Matt on with us as well to help share some of those insights with us as well to help answer those questions. So Matt, I believe you are on with us.
Yeah, I'm here. My camera, it's not letting me turn it on, but I am
I
here.
think I just enabled it for you, so maybe try that again.
There we go.
All right. So again, if you have questions, definitely drop those in to the Q&A. We have recorded this and the slides will be available, and we will definitely send those out to you once they become available. So I know, Matt, one question that has come in was about what is the latest version of GP that can migrate to Business Central in the cloud?
Yeah, so it's GP 2015 and SQL version 2012. So if you're on GP 2015 and your SQL is 2012 or later, you can use the migration tools to migrate. And then, of course, if we do it manually, then it doesn't matter which version you're on, but to use the migration tools.
Okay. And then can you talk quickly about the learning curve, since we did talk a little bit about Business Central? Like, what is that learning curve going from GP to Business Central?
Yeah, so I mean, it is a different system and it's a different product, so there is a learning curve there, right? It's not going to be it looks different, but it is an accounting system. It does the same functionality that GP does. And the nice thing is, if you were to switch and work with us, we know both systems very well. We've migrated people, so we can point out, in GP this is this, and over here this is what this is. So here's how I print checks in GP. Here's how I do it in BC. A dimension means this in GP. So there is some nice ways we can kind of bridge that gap to get you over there to BC if you wanted to go that route.
Perfect. All right, there's another question that came in about this person says they have attachments to GP cards for customers and vendors, and they asked about the migration to Business Central, if those attachments would come over as well.
Yeah, so there isn't an automatic way to do that. So there is ways to attach documents in BC natively or through TrendDocs or something like that, but there is not a nice, easy, smooth migration there. It would have to be a little bit manual work there to move those.
And I know you covered this during the presentation, but the historical data, it does come from GP into Business Central?
So there's certain tables they bring over. I believe it's AR, AP, sales orders, POs, and inventory transactions. They come over. Now, the catch there is they don't go into the normal BC tables. So they actually have historical tables that those get stored in. So you can look things up or create Power BI reports or Excel reports, whatever you need to, but that's how they come over. And it's those 5 items that do come over.
Okay, perfect. Again, if you have a question, we have another minute or two. Definitely drop that into the Q&A. Drop your email if you'd like a copy of the presentation slides or recording once that's available. And then, Matt, I think maybe the final question before we get out of here at 10:55. What's the best way or easiest way for our clients to reach out to Trendsoft? Is it through direct email? Is it through calls? What's that best way?
Yeah, so I think the best is to go to gpsupport@trendsoft.com. And the reason being, let's say if you direct email me and I'm doing a session or I'm out of town or I'm on site, I may not get to that for, it could be a day, it could be 2 days. But if you do go ahead and send it off to GP support, somebody will get some eyes on that and we'll be able to get you the help. So that's probably the best way. Doesn't mean you can't do it the other ways. We'll definitely still answer them, but that is the best way to make sure somebody gets eyes on it.
Yep.
Perfect. All right. Well, Matt, I don't see any other questions, so I think maybe you're off the hook for now. With that, just a couple of wrap up here. A little bit of homework for everybody on the line here. First, be sure to complete that session evaluation once that comes available. I think you have until Friday to get that completed, and we'll be drawing the giveaways next week. Secondly, for those of you that do have questions, support needs, etc., please reach out to us at Trendsoft. Talk to Tara and I or your technical representative. We'll be happy to talk about how we can help you receive some of that efficiency, automation, or any questions that we talked about on our presentation. Thirdly, give us a follow or a like on any of the social media platforms. Follow us on Twitter at trendsoft.com. We're also on Facebook, LinkedIn. Those are just nice areas where we're often putting out posts, updates, and release information and webinars for you. Then finally, visit our website, trendsoft.com. We have our blog there that we're continually updating and pushing content out to as well. All right, with that, just wanted to thank everyone for joining our Dynamics GP session today. On behalf of the entire Trendsoft team, we'd like to definitely say thank you to each of our clients in attendance and for those of you taking time out of your busy day to participate. We look forward to